Thanksgiving used to be one of those holidays I didn't really care for either way, until I married into a family that turned it into a battlefield of passive-aggressive jabs and porcelain smiles. My name's Nathan, I'm 31, and I've been married to my wife Emily for just over 4 years. I've always believed in keeping the peace, picking my battles, and giving people the benefit of the doubt. But sometimes, those beliefs become a trap you don't even realize you're stuck in until you're drowning in fake pleasantries and forced smiles at a table full of people who see you as a stranger no matter how many years you've shown up. Emily's family is tight-knit. On the surface, they do group texts with heart emojis, share Facebook posts about how family is everything, and host Sunday dinners like it's 1955. But beneath that Norman Rockwell exterior is a hierarchy carved in stone, with my mother-in-law, Judith, sitting squarely on top like a queen who never relinquished her crown. She's the kind of woman who says things like, "I don't mean to offend you," and then absolutely means to offend you. Her voice is sweet, her tone is polite, and everything out of her mouth feels dipped in honey and laced with arsenic. And for years, I told myself it wasn't personal. She just had a strong personality. She needed time to adjust. She was protective of her daughter. Excuse after excuse. The first Thanksgiving I spent with them, I chalked up her coldness to unfamiliarity. I wasn't her son. I was the outsider dating her only daughter, and she was sizing me up like I was interviewing for a role in her family's PR campaign. She called me Nate instead of Nathan, even though I politely corrected her 3 times. She insisted I sit on the end of the table where the partners sit, away from the heart of the family cluster. And when I brought a bottle of wine as a hostess gift, she smiled and said, "Oh, that's adorable. We usually do reds, but I'm sure someone will drink this." But like I said, I let it go. I figured holidays are stressful, and I was new to the dynamic. Over the years, though, the comments became less subtle and more pointed. She would introduce me to extended family as Emily's husband, with a sort of shrug, like she was apologizing for it. During conversations about family trips, I'd hear her say things like, "We wanted to just be family this time," while looking directly at me. I wasn't invited to her 60th birthday cruise even though Emily was, and when she protested, Judith simply said, "Oh, come on, you'll need a break." I wanted to just be us girls. I stayed home and worked that week while my wife sipped pina coladas with a woman who barely tolerated my existence. Now, here's the part where I admit something I've never told anyone outside of Emily. Judith owes her business to me. Well, to be technical, to my credit score. About 2.5 years ago, she was trying to expand her boutique. One of those overpriced gift shops that sells lavender soap, handmade mugs with motivational quotes, and overpriced scarves no one wears. The bank wouldn't approve her for the business loan she needed, and somehow, through a combination of guilt, family pressure, and my desire to be accepted, I agreed to co-sign the loan. It was supposed to be temporary, a bridge to help her get through the expansion. She told me, 6 months, max, and I'll refinance it under my name. That was 31 months ago. And of course, nothing got refinanced. The boutique struggled through a slow winter, and then another. She downsized staff, but kept the storefront. Revenue dropped, but she kept reordering inventory. Emily gently tried to talk to her, and every time Judith deflected or made excuses. "The holiday rush will cover us. I've got a promotion coming up with the Chamber of Commerce. I just need a little more time." And I kept quiet. Every month the loan was paid just on time enough to avoid a red flag, but I watched as my credit began to quietly suffer. I wasn't naive. I knew this wasn't going away, but I thought, we're family now. She'll make good on it eventually. Maybe this is just her way of testing whether I'm truly in for the long haul. Then came this last Thanksgiving. It was already tense before we walked through the door. Emily had gotten into a minor argument with her brother the week before. Something about how she wasn't involved enough in family matters now that we'd moved to a different part of the state. Judith had, of course, taken his side without question. But Emily wanted to go, as always, and I agreed, as always. We brought a pumpkin pie I baked myself. I like to cook, it calms me. And I'd made extra whipped cream to go with it because Judith once said, "Store-bought just tastes like air." It was my little way of trying. Again, dinner was at 5, but we showed up at 4:45, and somehow we were already late. Her tone was clipped when she opened the door. "Oh good, they're here," like we were guests arriving at a charity gala. No one greeted us at the door. No one offered to take our coats. We walked into the living room where everyone was already halfway through wine and hors d'oeuvres. Her brother didn't look at us. Her father gave me a tight-lipped nod. I should have left then. We sat through small talk. More wine. The usual round of passive digs about how we must be so busy with our quiet little life away from the family. When dinner was finally served, Judith had rearranged the table. Emily was next to her aunt. I was on the far end again, this time next to a folding chair wedged into the corner, like I was the overflow seating. I smiled. I said nothing. We went around the table saying what we were thankful for. I said I was thankful for a wife who challenges me and keeps me grounded. Judith said she was thankful for a family that sticks together, even through tough times, because real families never let each other down, no matter what. Her eyes didn't leave mine as she said it. Not even for a second. After dessert, things started to thin out. Judith caught Emily for a chat in the kitchen, and I was left alone in the dining room picking at crumbs and counting the minutes until we could leave. That's when she came back in, standing behind me while I poured myself some coffee. "Nathan," she said, and her voice was unusually calm. I looked up. She was staring at me like we were the last two people on Earth. "You know," she began, "you've done a good job staying quiet all these years. I've appreciated that." I blinked. "Okay, but you need to understand something," she continued, walking around the table to sit across from me. "You married into this family. That doesn't mean you are this family." I put the cup down. She smiled, that tight little smile she reserves for moments when she thinks she's being profound. "You're just a guest, Nathan. And that's okay. We all play our parts. But you'll never really be one of us." "Not really." I didn't say a word. I didn't even look away. I just sat there and let her say it. And in that moment, I felt something click. Not snap. Not explode. Just click. Like a puzzle piece sliding into place, revealing the full picture I should have seen all along. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I didn't even mention the loan or the fact that without me, she'd have never opened that second location she brags about in every conversation. I just stood up, pushed in my chair, and told Emily I was ready to go. 3 days later, I called the bank. For the next few days after Thanksgiving, I moved through life in a sort of calm detachment, like I was watching myself from a distance. I still went to work, still did the dishes, still kissed Emily goodnight. But something had shifted. That comment, "You're just a guest in this family," had broken something open inside me. And not in a loud, explosive way. It was quiet. Final. Like a door I had been politely knocking on for years had just been slammed in my face. And instead of knocking again, I turned around and walked away. Only this time, I took the keys with me. Emily noticed almost immediately that something was off. We've always had a strong relationship, built on communication and, frankly, surviving her family together. She saw it in the way I sat at the table during breakfast and stared out the window, coffee untouched. She saw it in the way I ignored my phone when her mom's name flashed across the screen with a chirpy, "Hope you two made it home safe," text. She asked if I wanted to talk about it. I said not yet, because I wasn't sure how to tell her what I was planning without sounding vindictive. I needed time to be sure. Not angry sure. Calm sure. Meanwhile, Judith was back to her regular programming. She posted a carousel of Thanksgiving photos on Facebook titled "Grateful for Family," with a caption that read, "So lucky to be surrounded by people who truly belong together." I wasn't in a single one of the photos, not even the group shot. It was like I'd been photoshopped out of the evening. She even commented under a photo of Emily and her brother, "My two favorites. Always knew you'd have each other's backs for life." I didn't show Emily. I didn't need to, because what happened next was far more telling. A week after Thanksgiving, Judith called Emily in tears. Her boutique had been hit with an unexpected inspection that found a handful of building code violations in the newly renovated space. Something about the wiring not being up to code, a ventilation issue in the back room, and some improperly labeled herbal products that now needed lab verification. She was fined, and the inspector gave her 30 days to bring everything up to code, or she'd face a forced closure. Emily was sympathetic. I watched her on the phone, pacing the kitchen, nodding along. Her heart's too big sometimes. She offered to help call some contractors, and Judith immediately asked if we could float her a bit of cash to tide things over until the holiday sales kicked in. Emily glanced at me, covering the phone. I shook my head just once. She froze. "Mom, I don't think we can. she said, her voice hesitant. We're still paying off the roof repairs, remember? Judith wasn't pleased. I could hear her tone spike even from across the room. She didn't yell, not outright. But she launched into this disappointed sigh, followed by a soft, "It's just a little help." I didn't think I needed to spell out how important this business is to our family. There it was again. Our family. I walked out of the kitchen. Quietly. Calmly. I opened my laptop, logged into my bank's loan portal, and checked the most recent payment status. The boutique was late again. Not enough to trigger default, but enough to ding my credit another few points. I clicked the option that read, Initiate Release of Cosigner Liability. It wouldn't take effect immediately. It had to go through underwriting and would only finalize if the borrower didn't qualify on their own. But here's the thing. Judith wouldn't qualify. Not without me. I closed the laptop, breathed in deep. I hadn't even taken my shoes off yet. The next 2 weeks were filled with little moments that chipped away at the illusion I had held onto for years. Emily's father, Michael, called to ask if we were seriously skipping the family tree decorating party this year. I told him we needed some time. He responded with, "It's not about you, Nathan. It's about tradition." I didn't respond. Judith followed up with a text to Emily the next day saying, "We missed having you. Hope everything's okay at home. Let me know if you need to talk about anything. Just you and me, of course." I didn't respond to that either. Emily started noticing, too. For years, she had walked this tightrope between loyalty to her family and love for me. She saw the way they treated me, but she also grew up in that environment. When you're raised inside the walls of a fortress, you don't always notice the cracks. But something had changed after that dinner. She asked if I remembered what her mom said. I told her I remembered every word. That's when she got quiet. Not defensive, just sad. "I don't know why she does that," she said. "It's like she wants you around to check some box, but never actually treats you like you belong." She said I'm just a guest, I told her plainly. And I believe her. I could see that hit her. But she didn't argue. She just nodded slowly and left the room. That night, she crawled into bed and curled against me like she used to when we first moved in together. No words. Just silence. 3 days before Christmas, Judith called me directly. I let it ring twice before I picked up. "Nathan," she said, cheerful. "Hi. So listen, I didn't want to bother Emily with this because she's got enough on her plate, but I've been going back and forth with the bank and there seems to be some confusion with the loan paperwork. They said something about a change in the cosigner status. I told them it had to be a mistake, obviously, but it's not a mistake," I said. Silence. "I requested the release of my liability," I added. "I'm no longer comfortable being attached to the loan." Her voice was tight now. "Nathan, you do realize what this does to me, don't you?" "I do. This could default. They could seize the business." I said nothing. Her tone shifted. More desperate now. "I don't understand. Why would you do this to us? After everything we've done for you." "You said I'm not part of this family," I said flatly. "You made that very clear." She was quiet again. Then she said, with forced calmness, "I didn't mean it like that." I let that sit. Then I said, "I did." Click. Emily found me on the porch later, coffee in hand. She didn't ask what the call was about. She didn't need to. She just sat next to me, pulled her knees up to her chest, and said, "Are you okay?" "I'm done pretending," I said. A few days later, Judith called Emily sobbing. The bank had officially declined her new application. Without a cosigner, the terms of the original agreement were void. She had 14 days to pay the remainder in full, or her assets would begin to be collected. She begged. She pleaded. She said things like, "I didn't realize what I was saying that night," and "It was the wine talking," and my personal favorite, "I thought we had thicker skin than that in this family." But Emily didn't cave. For the first time, she didn't defend her mom or make excuses. She just said, "You hurt him, and I let it go too many times. That's on me. But he's not just my husband. He's part of this family whether you like it or not." Judith's response, "You're choosing him over us?" Emily's voice didn't waver. "No, I'm choosing what's right over what's comfortable." That's when the Real storm started. Judith stopped calling. Michael sent Emily an email accusing her of abandoning her roots. Her brother sent a group text saying, "Guess we know where your loyalty lies. Hope it's worth it." The cousins, who used to like our housewarming parties and hand-me-down concert tickets, slowly went silent. And then, something else happened. Judith showed up at our front door, trembling, makeup smudged. Her boutique was officially closed. The windows were papered. The landlord had locked the doors. She held a stack of papers and a bag from the pharmacy, like she wanted to look small. Harmless. She said, I need to talk to you. Please. And what she said next changed everything. Judith stood on our front porch like a woman unraveling in slow motion. Her eyes were red, not from crying recently, but the way they get when someone's cried themselves dry and then kept pushing anyway. She was clutching a paper bag that said CVS on it, like she wanted me to think she'd just come from a doctor, or maybe the pharmacy, something that would suggest vulnerability. The stack of papers in her hand was frayed, cornered, and clutched so tightly that the ink had smudged in places. I didn't open the door right away. I just looked through the peephole for a solid minute, watching her shift her weight from foot to foot like she wasn't used to waiting. When I finally opened it, I didn't say anything. I just leaned against the frame. She blinked at me. Nathan, please. I know you don't want to see me, but I need to talk to you. Just 5 minutes. That's all. I stepped aside, wordless. She took that as a yes. Judith walked in slowly, as if entering enemy territory. She didn't make eye contact. She looked around the living room like she expected someone else to be watching. Emily was at work. I hadn't told her that Judith was coming, mostly because I hadn't known myself. She hadn't called ahead. She sat down on the edge of our couch like a stranger in a waiting room and placed the stack of papers on the coffee table. I know you think I'm this horrible person, she started, hands folding tightly in her lap, and maybe I am. Maybe I've made mistakes. But I never meant to hurt you, Nathan. I was just trying to protect what I built. I stayed standing. She noticed. She motioned to the stack of papers. This is everything. Loan documents, bank notices, the foreclosure notice. I wanted you to see it all, to understand what's at stake. I looked at them but didn't reach for them. She kept talking. When I said those things at Thanksgiving, it wasn't about you. It was about me. My fears. My control slipping. I felt like I was losing my family and my business at the same time. And I said something cruel to make myself feel bigger in the moment. I thought you were just going to ignore it, like always. But then you took away the only thing holding this together. I nodded slightly. You mean your safety net? She winced at that. Then, suddenly, she leaned forward and said, but there's something else. Something you don't know. That's when she reached into her coat and pulled out a smaller envelope. Yellow. Worn. This isn't about money, she whispered, placing it on the table. It's about history. Family history. I didn't touch it. She exhaled. Emily doesn't know. Michael doesn't know. No one knows. But I thought you should. And then, before I could say anything, she stood up. I'm going to leave now. Because what happens next should be your choice. She walked out the front door and down the steps without looking back. I stood there for a long time before I finally sat on the couch and stared at the envelope. I didn't open it that day. Truth is, I didn't want another secret to manage. I didn't want her redemption arc. I didn't want a plot twist. I just wanted my peace back. But peace is a funny thing. You think you'll find it in silence. But sometimes silence is just the absence of clarity. The next week was the hardest I'd experienced in years. Not because of Judith, but because of what came after. The calls ramped up. Michael left 2 voicemails a day, switching between anger and pleading. Emily's brother, Dan, sent her a novel-length email accusing her of turning her back on blood. Cousins unfollowed her on Instagram. Someone even removed us from the extended family calendar without a word. Emily took it harder than I expected. I think part of her had always believed that no matter how messy things got, her family would never actually ice her out, that there were lines they wouldn't cross. But this was different. This was exile. I found her crying in the shower one morning. The water was still running, but she was just sitting on the floor, hugging her knees. I sat outside the curtain, not saying anything, just letting her feel it. Later that night, she asked, did I make the wrong call? No, I said, but I lost everyone. I took her hand. You lost people who were okay with disrespecting the person you love most in the world. That's not everyone. That's just the wrong ones. She didn't say anything back, but she didn't let go of my hand. That was the lowest point, and it was the turning point. In the days that followed, I got serious about rebuilding, not just for me, but for Emily too. We stopped waiting for apologies. We stopped refreshing our phones hoping someone had come to their senses. We started focusing on us. I began the slow work of repairing my credit, filing paperwork to remove any lingering connections to Judith's loan, and speaking with a financial advisor about how to prevent anything like this from happening again. It was tedious, frustrating, and occasionally infuriating. But it was ours. It was mine. Emily, for her part, threw herself into her art. She's always been a brilliant illustrator. Used to paint custom pet portraits on Etsy years ago before life got busy. She pulled out her old sketchbooks and started drawing again. At first it was just a few pieces. Then it was 10. Then 20. I helped her set up a small online shop. Nothing fancy. Just a clean layout, a good domain name, and a couple of mock-ups. She named it Soft Lines. We posted it to Reddit, to a few art forums. Within a week, she had a dozen orders. Then 100. Watching her glow again, watching her slowly reclaim herself, it lit something in me too. I started baking again. I'd always loved it, even had a short stint as a pastry chef before I went into consulting. I made cinnamon rolls for our neighbors, cupcakes for the mail carrier, bread for the woman who walked her dog past our house every morning and always waved. Word got around. I got asked if I took custom orders. I said yes. By mid-February, Emily's shop had made more than her old job in 2 months. And I was shipping boxes of biscotti and brioche twice a week to addresses across the country. One customer emailed me to ask if I could make a lavender lemon tart with a crust that didn't fall apart during shipping. I spent 4 days perfecting it. He ordered 20. Judith's name stopped coming up. Mostly. But the envelope stayed in the drawer of our coffee table. Until one night, in early March, I couldn't sleep. The house was still. Emily was curled up under my arm, snoring softly, and the moonlight was pouring in through the blinds like a quiet spotlight. I got up, walked to the living room, and pulled out the envelope. It had my name on it. Not Nathan. Not Nate. Just for you. Inside was a letter. Handwritten. No date. It said, Nathan, you don't know this, but your father and I were married before I met Michael. It didn't last long, and no one in the family knows because we agreed to keep it private. Your father wasn't ready for a family. I was too young to understand what I wanted. We ended it cleanly, quietly, but we stayed in touch, always in the background of each other's lives. When I met Michael, he was everything I thought I wanted. Steady, secure, acceptable. And when I got pregnant with Emily, he insisted we never talk about my past again. But here's the thing. Emily isn't Michael's daughter. Your father is her biological dad. You and Emily aren't related by blood, but you are tied in a way neither of you ever realized. I told myself I'd take this to the grave. But maybe you have a right to know. Maybe you were meant to be in her life all along. Judith. I stared at the letter for a long time. Not because I was angry, but because for the first time in all these years, I finally understood her. She had been living with this lie for decades, wearing it like a second skin. And the deeper I thought about it, the more I saw the truth. She didn't hate me. She hated what I reminded her of. Her mistakes. Her past. The life she could have had. And yet, despite all that, her daughter had fallen in love with me. Judith didn't see me as a guest in the family. She saw me as a ghost of the life she buried. And now, that ghost had taken everything away. I didn't wake Emily that night. I didn't even tell her the next day. Instead, I burned the letter in the fireplace. Not out of spite, but because some truths are poison in the wrong hands. Emily didn't need to carry that weight. Not after everything. What she needed was peace. And what I needed was the final piece of the puzzle. Because the rise was coming. And Judith had no idea what was about to unfold. I didn't speak to Judith after reading the letter. Not for a day. Not for a week. Not even when Emily received a thin birthday card in the mail with a single sentence inside. Family always finds its way back. I watched her read it at the kitchen table. She didn't say anything. Just slid it into the drawer with the unopened holiday cards we never mailed and went back to sketching a client's dog. Judith's boutique was still closed. The storefront had been stripped clean. No candles. No mugs with Boss Babe energy. No overpriced eucalyptus bundles. Just a for lease sign hung crooked in the window like a war memorial. I passed it every morning on the way to the bakery I'd started selling my cinnamon loaves to, and every morning, I felt the same quiet certainty settle in my chest. She wasn't done. Not yet. Judith had never lost before. Not like this. And people like her, people who live off control, don't go quietly. They reemerge. Desperate. Calculated. Ruthless. So I prepared. For the first time in my life, I stopped waiting for peace to come to me and started building it myself. I also started planning something bigger. Not petty. Not reactive. But surgical. It started with a phone call to an old friend of mine from college, Jeremy. We'd both been business majors, but where I veered into consulting and spreadsheets. He'd gone full entrepreneur and launched a string of wellness cafes in the Pacific Northwest. We hadn't spoken in a while, but he picked up on the second ring and said, "Nate the Great? Are you calling because you finally want in on the kombucha empire?" I laughed. "Actually, I think I have a different kind of project for you." Over the next hour, I told him everything. Judith's boutique, the way she'd run it like a kingdom, the niche market she once cornered, and then slowly fumbled away with bad decisions and worse ego. He listened, quiet, until I got to the part about how I'd co-signed the loan and been burned. Then he whistled. "Damn," he said. "So what's the play?" "I want to buy out the space." Jeremy was silent for a beat. "The old storefront." "Yeah. And do what with it?" "Rebuild it. But not as a boutique. I want something that directly competes with everything she used to claim was hers." "A revenge store?" "Not just a store. A brand." That got his attention. We started sketching ideas. A lifestyle shop that actually understood modern tastes. Not the try-hard kitsch Judith peddled, but elegant, minimalist products. Locally sourced soaps that didn't smell like your grandma's purse. Artwork from real indie creators, like Emily. Small batch candles that didn't give you a headache. Artisanal pastries on rotation. A gallery wall that doubled as an event space. It wouldn't just fill the gap Judith left. It would make her obsolete. Jeremy agreed to help with startup costs, on the condition that he'd get to name the signature drink. I agreed, mostly because I needed capital and knew I could trust him. He wired the funds within the week. I signed the lease 2 days later. The storefront was still dusty from the eviction. Judith had left behind a single shelf bolted into the wall and one broken chair in the back room. I walked through it slowly, alone, imagining what it would become. I didn't want it to look anything like it had before. No lavender walls. No fake rustic aesthetic. I wanted clean lines. Warm wood. Black accents. A feeling of fresh air when you walked in. I named it Hollow and Hearth. Hollow for what had been stripped away. Hearth for what would now be built. Emily didn't know at first. I didn't keep it a secret from her. I just waited until I had something real to show her. She'd been pouring herself into her online store, which was now booking commissions 3 months out. She'd hit her stride. She smiled more. Laughed easier. I didn't want to interrupt that with old wounds. But once the contractors finished the drywall and the lighting went up, I brought her to the space on a quiet Sunday morning. She stood in the doorway for a long time before stepping inside. "You bought this place?" she asked, stunned. I did. "Why?" "Because it used to be a monument to everything that hurt us. Now, it's going to be a monument to everything we're building." She walked in, slow and hesitant. Her footsteps echoed on the new tile floor. "I don't understand," she said, turning toward me. "What are you going to sell?" I smiled. "You." She blinked. "What?" "Your prints. Your cards. Your originals. This space will feature your work. And the art of others like you. We'll partner with real craftspeople. No mass-produced nonsense. We'll have local bread, too. From me. And tea blends. Every piece, every product, handpicked. We're not recreating her store, Em. We're burying it." She stared at me for a long time, her eyes shining. Then she whispered, "What if she finds out?" "She will." Emily walked to the window, staring at the same street her mother once looked out on while sipping stale green tea in her overpriced office chair. But she didn't look scared. She looked ready. That night, we built the website together. Jeremy's team handled the branding. He came up with the logo, 2 overlapping circles, one filled in, one just an outline, like a moon and its shadow. The opening was scheduled for May 2nd. On April 17th, Judith showed up at our door again. But this time, she wasn't alone. Michael stood beside her, arms crossed. And he wasn't pretending anymore. Emily answered the door while I stood in the kitchen, out of view. "Hi," Judith said coolly. "Can we come in?" Emily didn't move. "Why?" Michael jumped in. "We need to talk." "About the store." Emily narrowed her eyes. "What store?" "The one you're opening in my mother's old space," Michael snapped. Emily went still. "How do you know about that?" Judith pulled out her phone and held up a screenshot. Our landing page. The one with her daughter's art proudly displayed in the header. "I have friends, Emily," she said. "People who care about me. They saw this and thought I should know." "You're stalking our website?" Emily asked. "It's public," Michael said. "But that's not the point. The point is, you're turning our family's misfortune into a public statement. It's humiliating." That was enough. I stepped out from the kitchen and said, "No, it's justice." Judith's mouth tightened. "You think you're justified in stealing my space, my customers. Your space." I interrupted. "You forfeited that when you defaulted on your loan. A loan I co-signed. A loan you never refinanced, never took responsibility for, and never even said thank you for." She went quiet. Michael spoke up. "You're being vindictive. You've twisted Emily against her own family. Is that what you wanted?" Emily didn't let him finish. "No," she said, voice shaking. "You did that. When you stood by and let her tear him down year after year. When you stayed silent while she treated him like he was disposable. And now that you've lost control, you're trying to play the victim." Judith's eyes glittered. "You're making a huge mistake." Emily held the door open. "No, I made the mistake of thinking you'd ever see me as more than a reflection of your regrets." They didn't argue further. They just left, and we never heard from them again. At least, not until the grand opening. Because Judith did come, but not to browse, and certainly not to support. She came with a plan, and she didn't come alone. If you want the rest, just say the word. The morning of our grand opening dawned crisp and golden, the kind of spring morning that feels like a personal blessing. Birds chirped over fresh sidewalks, sunlight stretched across the polished windows of Hollow and Hearth, and a small line had already begun to form at the door by 9:30 a.m. Our ribbon cutting was set for 10. Emily stood beside me under the new awning, wearing a charcoal gray apron flecked with paint and flour, a symbol of who we'd become. She looked beautiful, grounded and radiant in her own skin. I watched her tuck a loose curl behind her ear and smile at the crowd. Not the stage smile I used to see at her family's parties, but the real one. The kind that starts in your soul and quietly takes over your whole face. Behind her, inside the shop, the shelves were perfectly stocked. Our tea blends, sourced from a Bosnian friend of mine who started a sustainable line, were already half gone from the soft launch the night before. My sourdough loaves were lined up like soldiers behind the counter, and Emily's prints hung framed along the far wall, catching light through the front windows. We'd done it. And then, just before we snipped the ribbon, Judith appeared. I almost laughed, not because I wasn't surprised, but because of how theatrical it all was. She arrived in head-to-toe white, her hair pinned back like she was headed to a garden party, and behind her trailed two people, a woman in her 50s with a clipboard and a man in a blazer carrying a small camera. Emily stiffened. Judith walked up with the smug, manicured calm of someone convinced the stage still belonged to her. "Nathan," she said, all teeth. "Emily." "Judith," I replied, with equal calm. She looked past me into the store. Quite a turnout. I'll admit, I didn't expect this level of imitation. "It's not imitation," Emily said, stepping up beside me. "It's a redefinition." Judith's smile twitched, just once. The woman with the clipboard cleared her throat and stepped forward. "Excuse me, are you the business owner?" "I am," I said. "Nathan Hale." She extended a card. "I'm Lydia Hoffman, with the Fair Business Association. We've received a formal complaint from a previous tenant of this space, claiming intellectual property theft and brand dilution. I'm here to review the claim and document your merchandise." Emily blinked. "You're serious?" Judith folded her arms. "I try to be discreet about it. But when someone hijacks your legacy and uses your own daughter's name to sell knockoffs," I cut in, "there's nothing to review. My wife and I own this space. We leased it fair and square. We rebranded entirely. Our inventory is original and legally sourced. And I have a cease and desist letter for any party who attempts to interfere with the grand opening of this business. Would you like a copy?" Judith's eyebrows flicked up. "You're bluffing." "I'm not," I said. Then I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket and handed Lydia the manila envelope I'd been carrying all week. Page 4 outlines the full breakdown of our licensing, vendors, and artist consents, including the paperwork from the bank proving the previous business defaulted and forfeited all trademark claims. The woman scanned it. Her expression changed slowly, the way a storm cloud starts to move off the horizon. Judith stepped forward. "This is harassment. He's manipulating my daughter." "Your daughter," I said, stepping closer, "is the co-owner of this business, and the first artist featured in our flagship exhibit, which, by the way, is protected under a curated copyright agreement signed by both of us. Any attempt to claim ownership over her work, retroactively or otherwise, will be met with legal action." The man with the camera was still filming, by the way, probably for Lydia's records, but I made sure to hold eye contact with him as I spoke. I wanted everything documented. Judith's voice dropped an octave. You think this erases what you did to this family? I didn't erase anything, I said. I stopped enabling it. She opened her mouth to speak again, but Lydia stepped in. I've reviewed the documentation. There is no case for fraud or theft here. Your complaint is closed. I suggest you refrain from filing future claims unless you have evidence. Judith stared at her like she'd been slapped. Then she turned her glare back on me. Then Emily. And for a moment, I saw it. The crack. The unraveling. The realization that this was no longer her story. And then she did something no one expected. She turned to Emily and said, "You'll regret this." Emily didn't flinch. I already did. But not anymore. Judith left without another word. That was the last time we saw her in person. The camera guy handed us a release form. Apparently he was freelance, hired for documentation, and told us that, honestly, the footage was some of the most satisfying karma he'd ever seen live. We cut the ribbon 5 minutes later. The store filled with people. Locals. Friends. Followers from Emily's art community. Small business owners who had quietly cheered us on. Strangers who'd seen the soft launch ad and decided to stop by. Within an hour, we'd sold out of all fresh bread. The biscotti was gone, and Emily had 2 people ask about commissions for their pets. By closing, we were fully backordered. That night, we sat in the back room of Hollow and Hearth surrounded by the quiet buzz of cooling fridges and half-empty shelves. Emily leaned her head on my shoulder. "She'll never forgive us," she whispered. "She doesn't have to," I said. We forgave ourselves. A week later, we heard from a mutual cousin that Judith and Michael had separated. Apparently, her finances had been a disaster for years. The loan default was just the first leak in a ship that had been sinking slowly. When she lost the boutique, she lost her identity. When she lost her daughter, she lost her legacy. And Michael? Well, I guess even enablers have a breaking point. As for the rest of the family, the ones who turned cold, some came back, eventually, quietly, through comments, DMs. A cousin who ordered a cake from our shop and left a 5-star review under a fake name. A card in the mail with no return address and a single line, "We were wrong. You too are the real thing." But by then, it didn't matter. We'd already built something stronger than validation. We'd built a home. We expanded Hollow and Hearth into a second location by the following spring, one that Jeremy helped franchise. Emily launched a seasonal print line. I got featured in a local magazine's Top Bakers Under 40 spread, which made her laugh until she cried because, as she said, "You're finally cool now." Judith faded into the background. But sometimes, when I'm locking up at night and the shop smells like cinnamon and cedar, I think about that moment on our porch. Her voice. That yellow envelope. And I realize something. Revenge isn't always fire. Sometimes, it's rebuilding in silence. Sometimes, it's waking up every morning beside the person who chose you and choosing them back, over and over. Sometimes, it's standing in the ruins of someone else's control and planting a garden. And sometimes it's baking a loaf of bread so good, the ghosts stopped knocking. We never saw Judith again. But we didn't need to. Because by the time she tried to reclaim her power, we had already turned her throne into a table. And we were finally free.